our starting point is always everything should work in PvP. We don't like to jump straight to disable them. But if we need to, because the only alternative would be watering the ability down to make it not a balance problem, then often we will make those exceptions. And that goes all the way back to 13, 14-year-old philosophies where Curse of Doom back in classic days couldn't be cast on other players because it would literally one-shot them.
And War Mode is still going to be enabled in Shadowlands, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Actually, Avatar, I've got a PvP question as well.
Go ahead.
So I did a lot of PvP in BFA because of War Mode, which I think is one of the coolest things in the game. And BFA is all about Horde versus Alliance, and I think it's quite clear that Alliance won the war. No, hear me out, hear me out. I'm not saying that's a good thing. The Alliance clearly won the war because we got the best mount, not only ever in the history of World of Warcraft, but in the history of video games full stop, the Vicious War River Beast, the beautiful roly-poly hippo. In the interest of fairness, what can the Horde ever be given ever again that could be as good as that?
I mean, is there anything as good as the hippo mount?
And don't say PvP vendors, because Ian, I can never find them. I just don't know where they, I can't.
I don't even know where to begin on this one.
No, I've got a genuine question, sorry. I'm going to do it, Avatel.
Oh, no.
I'm going to say it.
OK.
Flying. How's it going to work in Shadowlands?
The same way it has for the last few expansions. So I think it's... See?
OK, thanks. I'll see you next year.
And the mix of the chorus of boos and applause and cheers, even though there's a few more boos right now, is why we've come to this compromise, where if it annoys everyone a little bit, it's probably better than the alternatives. Because I think this has been a contentious issue, right? Of flying versus not. The middle ground we settled on for Warlords, where you explore the world from the ground to begin with, and then eventually soar above it once you've thoroughly explored and mastered it, is one we plan to carry forward.
And in Shadowlands, with the leveling system changing, so you level through one specific expansion, brilliant idea, by the way, how will that affect Pathfinders for past expansions?
That's a good question. I think there's some things you may need to revisit there. That's something we have to discuss, but we don't have an answer for that right now. It's a good point, though.
Thank you. I'm spent. Hello.
In World of Warcraft Classic, will we ever receive a toggle for the HD remodels?
Well, that's a very good question. So the initial reason for HD models was really to increase the fidelity of the character models so that they match more closely to the world that we'd come to know, right? As the years have progressed, the fidelity of all of our textures, our models, and generally the world had improved so much that the characters really got left behind, and there was a fairly extreme disparity between the look of them. So it was really an effort to not only improve the look and the feel of the characters, to push the game forward, but also to decrease that gap between the look of the two worlds. So with Classic, we're really trying to stick to the original vibe of the world. And I feel that HD characters probably would feel out of place in the Classic world. So we're disinclined to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. On to our next question, please.
Name is Zafir from Storm Rage server. Shout out to my guild, War Ensemble. Question is, will legendaries ever be transmoggable?
That's a good question. Short answer, yes. Yeah, honestly, I think when we first put the transmog rules in, way back in late Cataclysm, they were very restrictive, right? We restricted some silly items that have since been allowed. And back then, the idea was, well, these legendary weapons are the coolest looking weapons in the game. If you can transmog your Thunder Fury, you can transmog your Atiyesh, whatever, people will be walking around only using those, and it's going to make them feel less legendary. Many years later, there's a lot of really cool appearances there, and I don't know that there's a reason to continue to restrict that. So can't say exactly when, but very soon. Transmog your Thunder Fury, transmog your Sulfurous. Go nuts.
Thank you.
I'm going to take that back to Shadowlands again, because Big Brain is crafting your own legendary and then transmogging it. Galaxy Brain is crafting your own legendary and then naming it. Taliesin's law, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and then you have the right-click report option on the inspect screen.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the UI is your job.
What is the creative process when you choose to an expansion theme? And maybe more specifically, what do you guys do for Shadowlands?
All right, yeah, that's great. I think everyone should probably kind of chip in on that because we all have a different role to play. But typically, we begin the process of brainstorming a new expansion even 2 expansions ahead. So there are aspects of what we were planning for Shadowlands back in Legion that allows us to actually set some of the story plot points that are now unfolding. But what happens is it's typically, myself, Ian is the game director, his lead designers, Eli is our art director, Frank, who's not up here right now, is our technical director, and then our production director. And we have kind of weekly sessions where we, blue sky, brainstorm ideas, think of cool things, throw away things. But you guys should talk about, individually how you're approaching it.
Yeah, it's a mix of things, right? There's, I think, first and foremost, the world. Like we have said in the past, and we continue to view the main character of World of Warcraft as the world, the environment, this living, breathing place that players will explore and fill with their own stories. And one of the first questions we ask is always, where do we want to go next? Where do we feel we should take this next? And often the story may twist and turn in ways to get us there, right? I think we certainly weren't perched on the edge of a precipice coming out of Mists of Pandaria, where it was super obvious, well, obviously the story has to lead us to ancient Draenor in an alternate universe. It was more, wouldn't it be awesome to look at this page of this manual that accompanied Warcraft 2? Wouldn't it be awesome to visit these zones and meet these characters? Let's find a way to get there. And then there's what are the features that make sense alongside that? And where does it fit? Sometimes you might come up with an idea for a place we want to visit or an expansion that would be awesome, but it's not quite yet the time. Like when we were talking about Mists of Pandaria, where to go next, Legion was one of those ideas that was in contention. But we, at the time, said, that's awesome. Let's do that as the one after this one and fully develop it then.
Yeah, specifically with this expansion, one of the pillars that we had early on is it's otherworldly. We're going someplace new. We're going someplace that we've never experienced before. And one of the typical processes that we go through is gathering a lot of reference. And this happens across design and art in the form of photographs, might be sketches and things that people have done along the way. It might even be digging up old concepts that we've done for previous expansions that maybe didn't work there, but would be really great ideas for what we're working on here. And I remember one of the most evocative images that we came across early on was this one of almost like a nighttime forest, and it had these kind of like specks of starlight all across this, this clearing. And it almost evoked this sort of celestial, starry forest scape. And initially, we thought we might pair that with Bastion, where we would have this very much like light and bright heavenly side of the zone, and then we'd have a dark celestial night forest on the other side. But it was such a huge theme and such a really interesting theme that we felt that it deserved its own space so that we could fully develop it, and eventually it became Ardenweald. But those types of things happen very often, that we can just really get an interesting idea, and it will drive narrative, it'll drive themes across the expansion, and it can be something as simple as just one image.
Have you ever actually named an expansion before you've developed it?
Actually, what's funny is that we're so sensitive about names getting out, and luckily there are never any leaks in regards to that. That we use this internal acronym, which is HOTS. And so all of our future expansions have a name that somehow adds up to HOTS.
Are you sure it's not Bananas of Tel Aviv? Because I've heard that one floating around.
Who told you that?
Yeah, the only exception is actually Legion, where that was effectively our placeholder name. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to do our Legion expansion. And we just kept calling it the Legion expansion internally for long enough that when it came time to think of a name, that one just was the obvious front runner.
And it made sense, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else?
Free Hong Kong, revolution of our times.
Sounds good to me.
Hey there. My name's Laurentium. So anyway, the identity of the mysterious jailer being unknown and somewhat a new figure in Warcraft LoW, is there a possibility that there could be a character we know is connected?
You got a question, mate?
Yeah. Free Hong Kong.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, sorry about that. By the way, guys, you were doing a great job today, so just want to say that. Really great job. Basically, my question is regarding the identity of the mysterious jailer. Is he someone that we know who is connected to death, say, for example, Argus the Unmaker, or Argus the Unmaker, Muerzala, or maybe Helia?
So it's really cool and interesting. So like as we're thinking about an expansion, as we're thinking about stories and all these kinds of things, we're always talking about the new stuff we're doing and new characters we have. And personally, I'm always thinking like, man, I bet they're going to ask questions about this, or like they'll think of this as some kind of mystery. And when we were talking about the jailer, we had all this cool stuff and backstory that we built and all this kind of thing. Honestly, it never occurred to me that someone might go, oh, is he someone we know? Because we just intended him to be this mysterious new figure.
All right.
So he's not someone that we've met before, but we'll find out that he's an important part of the cosmology of the Warcraft universe. And that's one of the big themes of the Shadowlands expansion, is kind of taking what we've known before about our cosmos and how the universe around Azeroth works, and kind of applying that to this whole new section of the cosmology chart that we didn't get to explore before. So his role will be important, but he's not going to be someone we know, although we're going to see a lot of figures that are familiar with that are either aligned with him or in some cases opposing him in the story.
Is he going to be present a lot? Like Arthur-style present?
Yeah, the jailer is the one whose conspiracy, the ties he has with Sylvanas, the things that he wants to do in the universe, that's driving the core of this storyline. So he's very much the centerpiece villain of this expansion.
I feel like you've just closed a lot of doors on speculation, but opened some up.
That's our job. That's what we try to do.
All righty. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy BlizzCon.
Next question, please.
Alrighty there. With the Heart of Azeroth being scrapped for 9.0, what will become of all of the rank 4 essences that we've collected?
Oh, you've got rank 4 essences?
Just a few. Just a few.
How many have you got?
Enough.
Yeah, me too.
Did you say enough? Yeah, so
Never have enough.
with with the Heart of Azeroth, we're going to try something a little bit different this time. We're not going to deplete it. If we're all familiar with our artifacts, you held it up in front of Sargeras' sword and kind of helped close that wound, which depleted our artifact. What we're thinking is more, as you move into the Shadowlands, the connection to your heart is a little bit weaker. So the essences and the Azerite powers won't be functional, but you'll still have them, right? You'll still have that, like, everyone's got their little time walking set that they put on all their cool stuff. If you sit in Orgrimmar, it'll still be functional there. But that's kind of the approach that we're thinking that we'll take for that.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next one, please. Oh my goodness.
Hi. Hi. What are some of the other customization options that we can look forward to for our WoW characters?
Oh, that's a great question. So customization is obviously something that we've been talking about for a long time, that you have been talking about for a long time, and we're really happy to finally be able to do something about it. So one of the other races that we're working pretty heavily on right now is Blood Elves, and we'll see, more than 40 additional customizations for them across male and female. Additionally, we showed some examples of the races that we've worked on currently, Wildhammer Dwarves, for example. We also showed some examples of humans. And I want to reassure everybody that was just a small sampling of what we're going to offer. Specifically in regards to humans, we want to offer a diversity that really represents what you can find in the real world, so that you can truly represent yourself in the game and really find that character that speaks to you, that represents you as a person. We're extremely happy to be able to do this finally, and we hope that you all enjoy it tremendously.
Awesome. Thank you.
How about a Welsh option? where it's exactly the same, but they're just like a foot taller and cooler. Anything else?
Alrighty, next. Ooh,
It was awkward, but we did it.
next question.
I play on a pretty small to medium pop server, and it kind of makes it hard to get excited about Shadowlands because there's not very many people to play with sometimes, especially when we're trying to do Mythic or high-level PvP. Are we ever going to see any more realm connections or anything in that manner to help improve the experience of people who play on small to medium pop servers?
Yes. Yeah, that's something we absolutely need to do. We have, the cross-realm grouping and all of that helps with a lot of our gameplay is not an adequate answer if you're looking to do Mythic raiding, if you want a server economy that can support that and other things. And I think we haven't taken a look at balancing out realm populations in the recent past, and it's something we need to do very soon. And I can't give you an exact timetable, but genuinely, it's a topic that I'm going to bring up with our server team and see what we can do within the next week when we get back to the office. I'll bring it up within the next week.
Bring it up then.
And then,
Wow.
Sorry. Then we'll do it as soon as we can.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Meanwhile, half our server team has a heart attack watching this.
Yeah, I think they just quit.
Hi, guys. I have a question about the soundtrack for World of Warcraft. So when a new expansion pack comes out, we get this amazing soundtrack. And as the expansion pack continues to have new patches come out, we get exposed to new zones like Nazjatar, Mechagon, raids, and there's some really great music in there that isn't on the soundtrack. So have you guys ever considered releasing additional digital tracks, et cetera, as it unfolds?
Because the soundtrack is purely digital now as well, right?
So the short answer is we're absolutely working on that. That is something we want to do. We are going to do this not next week, but we will have this before before Shadowlands comes out, so that we can capture some of this music that we have right now in Battle for Azeroth. I don't know if you're going to love the soundtrack for Visions of N'Zoth, some really crazy, ambient work. I don't know if you've seen some of the instruments that we literally built to make that soundtrack. But I'm so glad you asked that question. Yes, we're going to make that music available to you. We just got to figure out the best way to do it, but we'll do it.
Great, thank you.
Just plug it right into my brain, please. I love it. Can I take a quick poll? How many of you guys actually play with the music on? Honestly, sometimes I just go to Grizzly Hills and sit there, and it's like, it's my happy place, right?
That's all very well and good, Evertel, but we all know that I'm not allowed to play with the music on, so I can hear you shouting at me when I'm standing in front. So I'm glad you enjoy it. Haven't heard it since
Next question,
2012.
please.
I was just wondering, lore-wise, who won in Stromgarde and Darkshore?
Yeah, so our war fronts for Battle for Azeroth, right? Well, the Battle for Azeroth is still going on, but we're talking about Shadowlands, so we're looking to the future. So, again, you can look at this as what's going to happen, but canonically, the Alliance comes out on top in Stromgarde and in Darkshore.
Wait, so Steve. Yeah. Are you saying that Taliesin was right all along?
That's what I heard too. Taliesin was right.
Are you saying that's canon?
Well,
Could you repeat that again? I don't think he heard it.
Thanks, Steve.
As much as it pains me to do something that makes you happy, Taliesin,
Everything you do makes
we've
me
got to do what's right for the story, and those are just some key old Alliance locations, and that's just what feels right for the world.
Thank you very much.
Battle for BlizzCon.
Uh-oh. I wasn't going to do this, and I'm not going to do it, but why don't you just say what faction you're going for at the same time? 3, 2, 1. Yeah, me too.
It sounded like our raid group chat.
Hello. With the faction war settling down on both sides, would you consider... Come on. Would you consider loosening faction restrictions on grouping with your friends, perhaps using cross-faction communities or mercenary mode to allow raiding with your friend groups?
I promise this wasn't staged because the last 30 seconds could not have been a better setup for this question.
Yeah, they went from yelling at each other to now wanting to play with each other.
No, honestly, like, I understand you're trying to recruit to do hard content. You meet a friend who plays in the opposite faction. You want to play with them, and it would make things easier in many cases if you could. However, Alliance and Horde separation mechanically in game, that's just a pillar of what makes Warcraft Warcraft. Like, that's just what makes this universe what it is. And that division, it's part of why we have the competing cries of for the Alliance and for the Horde, right? There is some value to mechanical reinforcement of that division. And we want to look for ways to make sure that people have as many options of who they can play with, that people have options to fill out their raid rosters, and so forth. But Alliance and Horde uniting and formally grouping together and partying together is not in the cards, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Is that the answer you were looking for?
No.
No.
Thank you anyway.
On the subject of loyalties, I've been wearing a really big eyeball on my head for quite a while now. And
Wait,
I've
what,
seen
what
a lot of
eyeball?
them.
What are you talking about? I can't see it.
You haven't seen it, no. And, I love it, obviously, because it shows my dedication to our tentacly overlord. But it has been ruining my transmogs a little bit. Please tell me I'm going to be really glad that I made the effort to keep that eye on at the end of 8.3.
I mean, I don't know.
You want that one?
Aren't the Whispers of Insanity their own reward? I mean, are you just doing this in pursuit of some
yes.
imagined treasure? No, just be yourself and see what follows.
I think Steve has a good answer to this one.
Hey guys, so obviously my question is about Classic, naturally. With the release of Classic, I'm having a great time, my friends are having a great time, but I know some people maybe might want to see the possibility of either a Burning Crusade or Wrath of the Lich King server. Is that something that the team is taking into consideration for the future?
Okay, show of hands, how many people would like a Burning Crusade? Wait a minute, hold on. I'll get right back to you. How about Lich King? That's interesting. You want us to just skip to Lich King? Anyway, obviously we can do this. We've done it before. But we got to be really careful about how we proceed. We established Classic with no changes in mind. However, the reception from all of you has been so incredible, and I mean, literally, you blew us away. We had no idea. We knew it was going to be big. We had no idea it was going to be this big. And we would be super thoughtful in the way that we progress. We know that some people probably didn't sign up to go on to Burning Crusade, or maybe not onto Lich King. So we want to handle that in the right way. But we can do this, and we're not opposed to doing it. We just want to do the right thing.
Perfect, thanks guys.
Hey guys, after the Magar orc scenario, whenever we went to that, whatever happened to that alternate Draenor? And more importantly, are we going to run into the Lightbound, specifically Yrel, at any point in the future?
Yeah, so the Maghar orc unlock was one of my at least favorite allied race quest lines, because we got to go back and kind of bring that alternate timeline back into alignment, kind of. But it ends with this big cataclysmic attack. We see Yrel going all light crazy, and the orcs trying to resist that. And if you noticed, when the Maghar came forward, a bunch of other things kind of tagged along that are now kind of running around Azeroth, so we might see them. But Draenor, that Draenor is still out there. The light still has a presence on it. And when we, like we talked about as we develop future expansions and things like that, we always keep things like that in our back pocket so that when the time is right, when there's something that we're working on where the flavor really fits, that's something that we can go, hey, you know what? Remember those characters? You remember Yrel and how awesome she was? What would she be doing now under these circumstances with this whole new set of things? That's definitely something that we'll be keeping our eye on for the right time to maybe play something. Something with that.
Right on, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, right now we're focusing on life and death, but light and void are definitely one of those concepts that's out there to be explored in the future.
Yeah, the Shadowlands is, again, the first step in our big exploring the cosmology much more of the Warcraft universe, and Light and Void are definitely something on the horizon someday. Yeah.
So does this mean Chronicle is canon?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Chronicle is something that we worked on, you know, all of us together going through the Warcraft's history. But the thing to remember about Chronicle that I want you to think about is that, you know, even any history, even something that's as encyclopedic as Chronicle, is written from a certain point of view. And if you look at the history of Azeroth that was contained in there, and even you know what it talked about in terms of the cosmos and things like that, whose point of view would that have been from? Well, that's right, the Titans' point of view, and the people who worked for the Titans, because they ordered so much of Azeroth and what it is. But there's a lot of other perspectives. If you look at the section of Chronicle that talks about the Black Empire was this huge swath of history, but the Titans only give it a few pages, you know, from that point of view in this book. So there's other things in that kind of happen behind the scenes in Chronicle, or were hinted at in Chronicle, that you'll find expanded as we go into the Shadowlands and explore that cosmology even more.
Very exciting. Taliesin, have you scared away the rest of our questioners?
I didn't like the look of them.
Well, I've actually got one here from someone who isn't in the line, but who did ask a question, which I'll share. Speaking of Shadowlands, if Shadowlands is where the dead go, then what happens when we die in the Shadowlands?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I'll start with the aesthetic thing. One thing we definitely want to do is make that experience feel very different from what you experience in Azeroth. And we talk about this as the corpse run. You die, you go into this sort of grayscale world, right? All the color is removed, and it's very much the spirit walk. In the Shadowlands, it's different. Your spirit is not traveling away from you to someplace else, right? Here, you really are already in the afterlife. So what we've done is create an entirely different experience, and a different screen effect even. We have just a different paradigm, really. And I think you could probably talk a little bit about the narrative behind it.
Yeah, so, you know, from a story standpoint, our characters, as they've adventured through the game from vanilla all the way through Battle for Azeroth, you know, when we die, the screen goes kind of all gray, and there's whispery stuff and wispy clouds and all that kind of thing. So we were kind of skirting the edge of the Shadowlands. And spirit healers are part of the Kyrian Covenant. That's one of the jobs that the Kyrians have, is to send their watchers out into the mortal realm and to look for souls, mortal souls, that are on death's door, and then look at that soul and say, is that soul ready to cross over into the Shadowlands? Or is there something tethering it? Is there something holding on to it? Now, that could be a number of different things. It could be one of the other cosmic powers has tethered it for some reason. But in the case of our heroes, there's something else. It's our connection to Azeroth that's kind of tethering us. And so we always get nudged back into life. But when we're in the Shadowlands, there's still that power holding us. Azeroth still needs us. She still needs us to fight for her. So while the aesthetic will be different, the story behind it is very much the same. We get nudged back into life so that we can continue this fight to save the Shadowlands and ultimately save the cosmos from this power that wants to unleash itself upon it.
And when does Azeroth get born?
But we still corpse run, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and if you do want to experience the aesthetic, play the demo. It's on the show floor, and it will give you a first glimpse of what we're planning to do.
I can confirm. We played the demo, and for science, I messed up my keybinds, and we did die quite a lot. And it's exactly as you explained.
Did we die, or did you die?
It was me.
Yeah. Well, that's really brave of
For
you.
science.
Thank you.
Well, better question, how do you die in the afterlife?
Ooh. I was disappointed that I didn't appear in the Maw, in fact. And actually, I'd like to ask a question about the Maw, because we learned a lot more in the deep dive today, particularly about the Maw and the tower, which is the sort of gameplay center of that. How much of the tower do you envision how much do you envision the tower being a part of your gameplay at max level? Would you say it takes up the majority of your gameplay, like, say, a Horrific Vision, or is it less a part of it than that?
I think it's going to vary from player to player. I think that it's an activity that is designed for all players. That's part of why we made this an activity that can be done solo as well as with a group, because we know that if something requires a group, that inherently excludes some people in their playstyles. We're also excited to be able to offer a challenging solo progression experience once again, since the Mage Tower back in Legion. But there's going to be a range. I think you'll get some significant benefits. We tend to have diminishing returns, where maybe everyone wants to do at least one run a week or a couple of runs. But as we see with, let's say, the Mythic Keystone system, many people do their one run and stop for the week. Others grind out dozens of keys every week because it's just a ton of fun. There are rewards to be earned there, but it's the activity they most enjoy doing and proving to themselves how high they can go. And maybe we'll have leaderboards. We're excited to see the potential and the possibilities of this system.
I like the idea of saying how high you can go. Can you win?
Can you beat the
Eventually?
tower? Yeah.
I mean, that's honestly, we're still deciding that. Right now, our thinking is that it is sort of an open-ended system, kind of like Mythic Plus. Like, theoretically, there's a maximum value entered in a database somewhere, but if you reach that, you're probably cheating, and we're probably going to ban you, because it's so far beyond what should be accessible. Because I think we want to make sure that no matter how good you are, there's always one step further to prove yourself against, and to test yourself against.
So the tower sounds great, but I have to admit, my kind of core quest in Shadowlands is going to be to find out what the little owl people are in Bastion and befriend them, because yeah.
And then cosplay as them, right?
And then cosplay as them. That's always the next step.
I believe the owl people are actually one of the soulbinds for the Kyrian Covenant. So if they're your jam, we got you. Yep.
It's good to know. We have a question actually from our friend Hazelnutty, who asks, with mecha gnomes wearing armor leglessly, does that mean there's a possibility of playable races with more or less than 2 legs?
So the decision of playable races is always really particular to the story that we're telling. So it's not to say that we will do it, not to say that we won't. If it's appropriate for the story we're telling, the place we're talking about, the people we're talking about, maybe.
Yeah, and I think
you just sign yourself up for some incredible armor sets.
Oh yeah.
But I think that experiments, and actually we got some new tech to make mechanomes work that opens avenues that could let that be possible in a way that it might not have been if it makes sense for the story and the rest of the game, which is always awesome to see.
On the subject of gear sets as well, I read an interview that you'd done here at BlizzCon saying that tier sets would not be coming back next expansion. Is that true?
So, it depends.
Are you calling my interviewer a liar?
No, honestly, it's in what form, right? I think we have a wide range of epic armor sets. There are 16 armor sets for the different covenants, per material type, as well as additional sets that can be earned through other types of content. There's no question that we are going to get back to class-themed armor at some point. It's not going to happen in the initial patch of Shadowlands, but there is too much fantasy there and too much desire on the part of our team and on the part of the community to continue to explore that for us to leave that by the wayside for too long.
Sorry,
but our focus right now is Covenants.
But we are going to get some super sweet Covenant armor, right?
That's the plan.
Yeah. Sorry.
Literally today in Classic, people running Molten Core, trying to assemble their various might and other class sets. And that was a weeks-long, months-long journey that led to a sense of completion and satisfaction when you finally got there. Over the course of the years, as loot quantities increased, as we had multiple raid difficulties, by the time we got to, say, Warlords of Draenor, Legion, it was very common for players of a wide range of skill levels to be completing their entire sets within the first third quarter of a tier. In some cases, for high-end raiders, literally like week 3 of a 6 or 7 month tier. And then at that point, the set almost became a prison, to maybe exaggerate a little bit. You were locked into those pieces for those slots. No chest piece would ever compare if it didn't have a set bonus. No shoulder piece would ever compare. And a good third of your character, if not more, was effectively off limits for the whole rest of the tier. That said, set bonuses are super exciting. And so I think delivering that goal that you can work towards, that changes the way your class plays from tier to tier, that's something we absolutely want to embrace. just not necessarily in a way that it's a box that you tick a few weeks into a new raid tier and then never think about again.
So where does that satisfaction come from in Shadowlands raiding?
I mean, legendaries are going to be a huge source of it, is one of our thoughts. From climbing Torghast, figuring out what powers you want on the legendary and working towards crafting it and perfecting the item of your dreams, and then moving on to another one. And sets in other forms, we've had smaller 2- and 3-piece sets that we've continued to make throughout raids and dungeons, recently seen in the Mechagon dungeon and elsewhere. That's something we're going to keep doing. We want to continue to expand upon.
We definitely have heard the feedback and very much so agree that their sets were a really big part of what made raiding compelling, right? There was something that you were constantly chasing. It was a unique reward from a raid, and that's something that we know moving into Shadowlands, we're going to look for opportunities there. You know, with legendaries, like Ian mentioned, they're a really big part of what we imagine you'll be wanting to chase in Shadowlands, and you know, professions and crafting those legendaries will be a part of it. And you know, an example I love to use is when you got, you know, Sulfuras, that wasn't something that you only crafted. You had to go kill Ragnaros and get the eye to then craft that legendary weapon, right? That's a really cool thing that we could explore further.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it because I think it's just sad in a way because, you know, the raids in BFA were so good. Eternal Palace and Dazara Law are awesome raids. And, you know, sometimes I you know, help out heroic guilds when my mythic one is not available. And for the first time ever, this expansion, I only killed each final boss twice. And I was done. I had nothing else to be farming, which is a real shame because those raids were awesome.
We hope you'll have a reason to kill N'Zoth more than a couple of times.
Yeah.
So
you're going to want to kill him more than a couple times.
On that
And since you never die, you're going to get a lot of opportunities.
On that note, I'm aware that we have run a little bit over our time. This conversation has been brilliant. Thank you so much to our developers, to our people asking the questions, to all of you in the crowd as well today. I am really looking forward to continuing this conversation, answering the rest of these questions, and carrying on these conversations throughout BlizzCon today, throughout the community, and yes, on the forums, obviously. Have an amazing rest of the BlizzCon, guys. See you later.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending World of Warcraft Q&A. Up next, Diablo 4 World and Lore.